So I was thinking about sharing the birth story, but it happens that one of the, mom of course is the main event in the birth story, but another person who is very important in it is here today. I was not there. I think Hershey Lehman is the one we need to hear it from. So Hershey, you can come give us Paul's birth story.
Today we celebrated birth Paul's life. I happen to be one of those who was present at Paul's birth. People keep Okay. Well, as it so happens, we were, Norma, my wife, and our one or two children at that point were living in the same country. In this case, it was Tanzania, and they were living on the campus of a seminary, Mennonite seminary in Musoma area. And Norma and I and our family were living in the northern part of the Mara region, which was called North Mara District. And as it so happened, I happened to be the Mennonite, happened to be the administrator of the Shivani Hospital, which some of you may have heard about along the way. But in any event, actually it was a hospital and a nurse training center and a midwifery training center as well. But in any event, we were, even though we were fairly close to each other in miles, we had to go many miles around and across a ferry to get to the same place where Aunt Ruth and Don and her children were living. And since they were so far away, we invited Aunt Ruth to our house so that she could be close to medical services when this pregnancy that she had was going to take place. And so, sure enough, Aunt Ruth was with us for a couple of weeks, 1 or 2 weeks, maybe something like that. And the day came when this pregnancy was to be delivered. Aunt Ruth was having contractions, and so I was going to take her to the hospital, which was about a quarter of a mile away from where we lived. But that car would not start. That car would not start, and so finally Aunt Ruth said, I didn't know what to do, Norma and I, so finally Aunt Ruth said, well, I'll walk it. And over a mile, in contractions, and finally Norma said to me, first, she said, get her on the motorcycle. So, I got my motorcycle, it was a fairly big cycle, and I started up the path where Aunt Ruth had started, and sure enough, I saw her hugging a tree, and I knew that she needed more help immediately. So when she saw me, she was very ready to jump on that cycle with me, and she got onto a motorcycle very differently than my wife did. My wife would just throw her leg over the back of the cycle and sit on like you're riding a horse. But Aunt Ruth was accustomed to riding what you call side saddle, I think, or something like that. And so she backed up to my cycle and sat down, and I was, like I say, I was not accustomed to that. And so nearly did we get overbalanced. And if we had, she would have ended up on her back and me on my side. But anyway, we managed to get to the hospital. And at the hospital were a couple of nurses, probably midwives, training maybe, and they were there to welcome us, as I recall. And so I got down the roof off and in their hands, and I took a big deep breath. My responsibility was over, but finally got her to where she needed to be. And I rode that cycle home and found out Ruth, of course. And was only home a few minutes, and the phone rang. And the nurse was reporting that Paul Evan Jacobs had just been born. So that was the beginning of Paul's life in the state that we could see and grow with.
My dad had not, the time wasn't right, he couldn't be there for the birth. So they were talking on the phone to Dad, and Hershey's there prompting Alan, however old he was at that point, what to say. He said, so tell them you have a baby brother. I said, so Alan said, I have a baby brother. And then Hershey said, say, he looks just like me. And he said, and he looks just like Hershey.
I'm Alan. I'm Paul's brother, Alan. He's I actually was Bill Hager. He said he wanted to be invited up here. He went to the restroom. All right. So I don't have anything earth-shattering to share. Paul was up for anything, and he's the only guy I ever saw in my life who took the challenge and laid on his back, filled his mouth with milk, and had a dog lick it out. I think the dog thought it was just as freaked out as Paul was.
I'm Paul's brother-in-law. Love you, dear. I'm not even working through this without tears, but that's okay. The first wedding that Paul photographed at age 15, was it 15? Yeah, at age 15, was Barbara and Jamie. And I've had many adventures with Paul. He's a dearly beloved brother.
I'm not family, but I started out with Jonathan and Charles. I'm an artist, having just whatever work I did photographed. So maybe 50 years ago, I started with Jonathan, and I knew Paul early on. Finally, Paul was the owner of the business, and until just so soon, recently, I found out the information. And as I told somebody before, you hear about people who passed away, you were kind of close, and what a shame. But Paul was very deep with us. It just, that magnetism, charisma, just was the glue. And I really cared. And we loved it.
Well, if you lived in a house for many years, and 39 of those years, Paul was in the business part or in our house, there better be some information to tell. But anyhow, one of the things in working with Paul, when I'd be answering the phone, for the studio, and people would call to schedule appointments, and I got all the calls, whether they were called. But all the calls that any time someone was saying about a job that Paul did, they'd always say such good things. Oh, we just loved working with him. And I just thought you should know that. And then I actually should be telling this story when Tammy's hearing it. But I kind of held off on getting, we had a phone that had many extensions, but I still wanted to get all the incoming calls with the voice, as opposed, I didn't like calling when you got automatic service. But so when that happened, actually, when it was after Paul and Tammy were married, because I think Tam wanted to get directly to Paul without going through me first. But anyhow, Paul, when I go down and he was waiting with customers again, we had most pleasant customers, but you always had some that were a little cantankerous and demanding. Paul just would even it out and listen, and when I come with things that or orders that had to be asked, his standard line always was no problem. But the funny story I want to tell, because I have some grandchildren over here, involves them. So this was a winter, we had snow, and I was having two preschool grandchildren over while their parents were working that day. And Jonathan was on an MDS trip, and I just thought these children had to go sledding down our hill. And I told the parents, send out boots and snow clothes. And then I made this call, and found Nathan was in the area. And I said, Nathan, do you have an hour that you can come out, give these children a good snow experience? And he did. He squeezed it in and came out, and he made this ramp. And it was just, I was trying to do it with my video, with my camera, with my phone. I'm going to call Paul. Paul, can you please come out and get a picture? And Paul got this classic picture of them airborne, and they know what picture I'm talking about. Airborne, and Nathan there at the tail, all in there, bleeding, and just one of those classic pictures that Paul would do. And so it was the gift of that picture, but it's also the gift of the willingness to be part of our family, and I think you all can understand.
I just want to say, one year, the first year Paul came to our house for Christmas, I had everybody wrap their gifts in cartoons. Well, Paul, when he came, he had his wrapped in them. And I said, you don't get no points in that because you requested have the cartoons. He said, but I paid for mine, don't they count?
I'm Tammy's brother, almost my brother-in-law. We always had a lot of adventures to do at my parents' house, doing repairs and stuff. So the one day we had a repair to do on the back door, and I knew Paul was very handy with a lot of stuff that he did around the property. So it was cool one evening, and it started a little bit, and I had to cut the metal door. So I get the grinder out, and I start, and I stop, and I said, hey, you want this? He goes, oh no, good on. And I miss him a lot.
I became a bike rider because of Paul. He introduced me to it. I never changes, no expertise. But one of the first rides I did with Paul was the Seagull Century, which starts in Salisbury, Maryland, and ends in Salisbury. But in the meantime, it does a 100-mile loop around Eastern Shore of Maryland, going out to Assateague Island, back around, and ultimately back to Salisbury. So I had done it a year or two before that, and talked him into coming with me to and we rode together, and he promised he would stay with me. He would slow down enough for me to be able to stay with him. So we were riding, and every time somebody that was a little faster than we were going went by, he would often jump out and follow. I struggled to keep up with him. And most of the time he would realize that he would slow down and wait for me. Anyway, he pulled me through that ride at 17 miles an hour for 100 miles, which was like a record for me. And I was exhausted at the end. The next year, we decided to go again, but this time, my son-in-law Joel is standing over there with the camera, and Alan, and myself, and Paul rode it together. Well, Paul decided he was going to he was going to try and finish it in 5 hours. So 100 miles in 5 hours. He rode with, so Alan and Paul and Joel and I rode together, and we all 4 rode together for the first maybe 5 miles, I'm not even sure. Maybe it wasn't even that far. And then Paul took off. Well, we came in a couple of hours at least, maybe 4 hours after Paul did. He made it in 5 hours. We came in 8 or 9 hours. Anyway. And I've ridden with him since then, but it's always been with the agreement beforehand that he's going to have to slow down.
My name is Sasha. Paul is my uncle. One of my favorite stories is when we would always go down to the beach. Our grandparents would buy or rent a house for a week. And Aunt Tammy and Uncle Paul, when we were younger, they would always choose a day and we'd go get ice cream and have fun. And she mentioned the watermelon story earlier. But we ended up going and he was like, ooh, watermelon shake, that sounds really good. Except they did like the rinds of the watermelon, so it wasn't that good. But there was like 5 of us in the car and he kept going, oh, this is so bad. Oh, I have to finish it. Oh, this is so disgusting. But it was one of my favorite stories because it's just how he was.
I think everybody wants to go eat, but I'm Alan again, Paul's brother. When I went on the memorial ride with Paul's biking friends, I don't bike with that group. Well, I don't bike. But I was riding along, and one guy, he had looked like a real expensive bike, all outfitted and everything. His name was Joe. I don't think I saw him here today. Anyways, he came up to me, we rode together, and he said, you know, a few years ago, I lost my daughter to cancer. And he said, we never got that family picture. And he said, so I took these pictures to Paul, and I said, can you put these together and make a family picture? And Paul did. He took those pictures and he made a family picture for Joe. And Joe said it was just the most amazing, beautiful family picture. And it was just the most amazing thing. And he said, Paul, what do I owe you? And Paul said, I could charge you for that. And I thought that was
My name's Sabisa. One of Paul's nieces. Paul was kind of like a second father to me. Many times I spent weeks at a time over the summer, staying over there, helping them out with the kids and everything. And I even went with him to help with some of his photography jobs and all that. And even as I got older, I got my license and everything, I ended up helping out with taking the kids wherever they needed to go. One of my favorite things is he always took our family photos at the beach. And if we had a pool, he'd be up on the top deck, and then he'd run down the stairs. And at one point, he ended up tripping over something, falling into the pool, trying to get into the spot. But yeah, and those memories kept popping up on Facebook lately, and I'm like, those definitely will always remember about him.
I'm Sarah, Paul's niece. Uncle Paul, well,